There is an adage which says, "A good leader takes a little more than his share of the blame, a little less than his share of the credit." Several factors determine the stability rate and number of years leaders stay in power. From 1971 to 1979, Uganda was ruled by its third president, Idi Amin Dada. Idi Amin was a military officer and politician whose rule was characterized by brutality and dictatorship. Uganda suffered one of the hardest despots in modern world history during the reign of Commander Idi Amin, who was later nicknamed as the Butcher or Cannibal of Uganda. During his 8 years' reign, Idi Amin shifted from being a pro-Western ruler enjoying enormous support from Israel to being backed by Libya's Muammar Gadaffi, the Soviet Union, and Eastern Germany. He as well received support from Mobuto Seko of Zaire. As time went by, Uganda continuously faced unrest against Amin's persecution of some ethnic groups and dissidents. The country also had a poor international standing due to his collaboration with some terrorist hijackers in Operation Entebbe. Idi Amin's rule was also characterized by rampant human rights abuses, political repression, ethnic persecutions, nepotism, and severe economic mismanagement. Human rights groups and international witnesses have disclosed that about 500,000 people lost their lives during the dictatorial rule of Commander Idi Amin in Uganda. In October 1978, a brutal war broke out between Uganda and Tanzania known as the Kagera War. This war, which lasted for a year, was a great landmark in post-colonial history. The war was rooted in a deep rivalry between Idi Amin Dada of Uganda and Julius Nyerere, who was president of Tanzania at this time. The war brought an end to the 8 years of Amin's dictatorship in Uganda. This great conflict marred relationships between the two countries. This video seeks to show the events that unfolded during the Uganda-Tanzania War till the time Idi Amin died. Click the like button if you are already enjoying this video, before we continue, and endeavor to watch till the end. Idi Amin's rise to power in Uganda. Idi Amin Dada was born in 1925 in Koboko, a village in the Kakwa province, which is currently the northwestern region of Uganda. His independence and most decisive moments started in 1946, when he joined the British King's African Rifles, CAR, as an assistant cook. During his stay there, he also got some military training and was later on selected by CAR authorities to fight some battles alongside members of the infantry battalion. Amin's outlook, attitude, and communication strategies were greatly influenced by his experiences in the colonial military. In 1965, Uganda's Prime Minister, Milton Obote, and Idi Amin were involved in a deal to smuggle ivory and gold into the country from the Democratic Republic of Congo. At this time, Amin had gained a lot of popularity and recognition in Uganda. The deal, as later alleged by General Nicholas Olenga, an associate of the former Congolese president Patrice Lumumba, was part of an arrangement to help troops opposed to the Congolese government trade ivory and gold for arms supplies secretly smuggled to them by Amin. Milton Obote, on his part, was trying to fit himself as president of Uganda as all these events unfolded. He became the second president of Uganda from 1966 to 1971, and again from 1980 to 1985. Having learned that President Obote was planning to arrest him for misappropriating military funds, Amin seized power in a military coup on January 1971, while Obote was attending a Commonwealth Summit conference in Singapore. Mobilizations were made by people who supported Idi Amin to facilitate the overthrow of Milton Obote. Amin told the people of Uganda that he will release all political prisoners after elections were made. This shows that he had interest in ruling Uganda as well. 1 week after the military coup on February 2, 1971, Amin declared himself as the president of Uganda. He cancelled certain provisions of the country's constitution and soon established a defense advisory council composed of army officials with himself as chairman. During his reign as president, Amin issued approximately 30 decrees and insisted a lot on this decree system. He worked ceaselessly to fight all persons and groups that were still longing for Milton Obote's rule. They were predominantly from the Ekoli and Lango ethnic groups. In July 1971, many Lango and Akoli soldiers were massacred in the Jinga and Mbarara barracks. Some of them even disappeared alongside journalists, lawyers, religious leaders, foreign nationals, and other civilians. The growing atmosphere of insecurity and violence saw the killing of thousands of people for criminal motives or at will. Their bodies were dumped into the River Nile, according to Amnesty International. Some very prominent persons were also killed at the time Idi Amin was president of Uganda, such as Joseph Mubaru, former governor of the Central Bank of Uganda, Shinani Luwum, an Anglican archbishop, and Benedicto Kiwanuka, former prime minister and chief justice. It is alleged that Idi Amin recruited mostly people from his Kakwa ethnic group alongside South Sudanese into top-ranking positions of the cabinet. This partially explains why he was able to survive 8 attempted coups. The military of Uganda increased in number during his reign as president, half of which were South Sudanese, 26% Congolese, and just about 24% Ugandans. The economic struggle of 1972. In August 1972, President Amin declared an economic war that saw the expropriation of properties owned by Asians and Europeans living in Uganda. Many businesses owned by these people even formed the backbone of Uganda's economy. Amin expropriated businesses and enterprises belonging to Asians and Europeans and handed them over to his supporters. These businesses, however, crumbled and collapsed because of mismanagement and lack of appropriate expertise for maintenance. From the onset, Amin received support from Western powers such as Israel, Western Germany, and most particularly Great Britain. He was very loyal to Britain following his past experience. Amin also enjoyed support from the Soviet Union that consistently supplied him with arms and jets. These strong ties that he greatly benefited from, however, didn't last for a very long period. Watch what happened later on. While all these happenings were unfolding, political tensions gradually grew between Julius Nyerere and Idi Amin. Julius Nyerere, the then president of Tanzania, was a very close friend to Uganda's former president, Milton Obote, and refused to recognize the new regime in Uganda. When Amin rose to power in Uganda, he immediately implanted separatist measures to do away with Obote's supporters in the country. Threats and terror became the order of the day in Uganda, as many people who were against him were disported from the government and some later executed. By 1978, political tensions in Uganda were running very high, and President Amin survived a coup attempt from his opponents. He feared his defeat, which was drawing near, and started accusing Tanzania for violating his country's sovereignty. Amin ordered the invasion of Tanzania in October 1978, after hearing about plans to overthrow his government. Many soldiers of the Ugandan army blamed Lieutenant Colonel Budabika for starting the war at Kagera. He was accused of ordering soldiers from the Mali battalion at Lubiri to go and reinforce the attack. Many other soldiers gave different explanations for the war, claiming that isolated clashes along the border culminated in a series of violence that led to open warfare. The number of people killed under Amin's regime were quite numerous and vary according to different sources. According to some of these Ugandan soldiers, Idi Amin was not informed of the decision to wage war on Tanzania. It only caught Uganda by surprise. Nyerere, who was watching all these events keenly, knew that President Amin's counter-invasion of Uganda will be diplomatically denied by the other African states. With this in mind, he developed justifications for the invasion, one being that the Tanzanian forces were fighting to enforce national security, and that the Ugandan forces were fighting to liberate the country from Amin's dictatorship. However, the Ugandan forces were too weak to fulfill the role Julius Nyerere had envisioned for them. President Nyerere petitioned the OAU to get a reparation from Uganda for all lost and damaged items, including the Kagera salient that had been forcefully collected by Amin's troops. The Kagera salient was a 1,900-kilometer stretch of land at the border between Uganda and Tanzania, and both countries tussled to have it as part of their territories. Nyerere also reiterated on a radio broadcast that Tanzania would remain with the option of taking firm steps in defending herself and punishing the criminal, who was no other person than Idi Amin. As matters got worse, Muammar Gadaffi, who was the leader of Libya at this time, ordered his troops to support Idi Amin's, but while in Uganda, the Libyan troops did most of the lifting. Gadaffi realized that the Ugandan forces were not able to do away with Nyerere and the Tanzanian troops, so he decided to face them personally, but it was not an easy task. Between 1978 and 1979, Uganda and Tanzania had serious clashes, and Julius Nyerere, who was the president of Tanzania at this time, played a significant role in the defeat and overthrow of President Amin. Despite some dissenting voices, Nyerere's own disregard for state sovereignty was largely overlooked, as the fall of Amin's regime was quietly welcomed by the majority of African leaders. Amin blamed Nyerere for backing and arming his enemies, and retaliated by bombing Tanzanian border towns such as Bukoba and Mwanza. After the bombing incident, Julius Nyerere was encouraged by his generals to respond to Amin and Uganda in the same vein, but he instead preferred to settle the conflict. Many other people also urged him to respond in kind, but Nyerere turned down their requests and agreed to mediation overseen by the president of Somalia, Ziad Barre, which resulted in the signing of the Mogadishu Agreement. Perhaps if the OAU had met President Nyerere's demands that Amin renounce his claims over Tanzanian territory, apologize for the invasion, and pay for the damage inflicted in the Kajara salient, the conflict would have been settled peacefully. Nothing significant was done in this regard. Let us know you are enjoying this video by hitting the like button and subscribing to the New Tourist channel before we ride on to a more interesting aspect of the story. The fall of Idi Amin. Amin never wasted any opportunity to shake hands, pose for pictures, and take dancing steps with commoners. His informal personality made it seem like he really cared about the country. In 1977, President Amin reshuffled his cabinet and appointed General Mustafa Adrizi as vice president of Uganda. This nursed a split in the country between supporters of Amin and Adrizi, who wanted to expel all foreigners in the Ugandan military. The growing dissatisfaction in the army resulted in many coup attempts. Amin was even wounded in an operation which took place at Mafuta Mingi in June 1977. The number of supporters he had had drastically declined during this period. This operation at Mafuta Mingi was organized by the Ugandan Liberation Movement to overthrow Idi Amin's government. The Liberation Movement consisted of dissident Uganda Army soldiers and pilots, backed by business owners in Kampala and Entebbe. Upon the war's end, the Tanzanian government declared that Kajura residents who were displaced at different corners could go back to their region, and by August 1979, many of them had returned home. The Tanzania People's Defense Force was still fighting some people from Uganda who came to seek refuge illegally in their borders. Following a defeat in the Battle of Lukaya, some members of the Ugandan army reportedly urged Amin to step down. Amin refused to drop power and was forced to escape from the Ugandan capital city of Kampala on April 11, 1979, when it was captured. He escaped to Saudi Arabia and settled there for a number of years, where he was welcomed and given huge sums of money by the royal family to make him stay away from politics. While on exile, Amin continued to fund remnants of his army that fought the Ugandan Bush War. He left Saudi Arabia for Zaire in 1989 without the authorization of the government. According to Associated Press, Amin arrived in Zaire on a false passport, and officials there kept him under virtual house arrest. The Saudi Arabian government saw his departure as a great blow to their hospitality and care. He was refused the Saudi Arabian visa at the time he wanted to get back there, but after several appeals by King Hassan II of Morocco, he was allowed to return to Saudi Arabia. He promised never to participate in any political or military activities, and consequently spent the rest of his life in Saudi Arabia. He later became very ill and was diagnosed with kidney failure, which led to his death in 2003 in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. It is alleged that 2 weeks to Amin's death, a group of Ugandan compatriots had formed another movement known as Ugandan National Liberation Movement, which became the leading political group in the country. Yusuf Lule, one of the big wigs of this movement, was appointed as president of Uganda, but post-Amin Uganda turned out to be politically unstable, and Lule was replaced by former Ugandan lawyer Godfrey Bainagisa, who was also ousted from power 1 year later. Much has been said in this video about Idi Amin, but it is also important to note something about Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. He was the first African head of state to retire voluntarily. He stepped down because he realized that his socialist policies of communal ownership of farms and state ownership of services were not working. Yoweri Museveni, who is current leader of Uganda, ascended to power in 1986 after these tense events in the country. President Yoweri Museveni is regarded as a promising leader in Africa. This assertion is often made by people who witnessed or heard about the rule of President Idi Amin. However, there are some people who lauded Amin's effort to expel Asians from the country and continue to do so. You might perhaps have something to add to this video concerning how you feel or what you know about the rise to power and fall of Idi Amin Dada in Uganda. Drop them in the comments section below. Before we take leave of you, please like this video, subscribe to the New Tourist channel, and turn on notifications so you get notified whenever we upload videos on stories about Africa. Thanks for watching, and see you in our next video.